चीट करके टॉक स्वीट करके रैप में अपनी तू मुझको बिठा लेगा। मुझे जो तंग किया कुछ मेरे संग किया तो मेरी हाई हील से मार तो खा लेगा।
नच दिन खुले जाने जुल्फाए कालियां सीने विच दिल विल टक लैण वालियां नच दिन खुले जाने जुल्फाए कालियां सीने विच दिल विल टक लैण वालियां जादू तेरी ब्यूटी वाला नॉन स्टॉप खिचे
कहंदा हाई हील ते नचे ता तू बड़ी जचे हाई हील ते नचे ता तू
It is exactly 3 p.m. and today being the 10th of April in 2021, you are listening to Toki Mohoto on Capital Radio's Dialogue Sessions. It's a talk platform that was created to show us what is currently trending in South Africa, in Africa, as well as all over the globe. What you can look forward to today's show is quite an exciting lineup. From the first segment, which is called Why Vele. This is where we ask the question, why does it have to be? We're going to be in conversation with two stalwarts of thought leadership, as well as creative entrepreneurship, as well as approach to life. The first one calls himself an urban sociologist. His name is Leslie Dikeni. The second gentleman is a culture and arts manager. He also is a very prolific thought leader. His name is Vuyisile Mshutulu. We're going to be tackling the topic, South Africa's creative and cultural industries, which seems to have a poverty of ideas and absent leadership. Please look forward to that. It's going to start at 3:05 up until 4:22. After that segment, we're going to enjoy a bit of music, and then we return again at 4. I'm going to be speaking with a gentleman who is based in Mozambique. His name is Yasin Mohammed. He is a political analyst that is based in Mozambique. We're going to be debating the topic of Mozambique and what seems to be sporadic terrorism. Some say it's essentially resource wars. That is going to be starting at 4:05, going to 4:22. And our last segment, which is called World in View, we're going to be in conversation with two women. The first one is, all right, the first one is Melissa Fenn. She's South African based. And the second lady is Miss Huang. She's based in the USA. We're going to be speaking with them regarding what seems to be xenophobia. Xenophobia, for those who may not know, it is hatred or hate crimes or a bit of discrimination against Chinese people. We're seeing a trend in the USA, particularly where there's a spate of attacks directed at Asians. So the question we're going to be asking is xenophobia a benign war against China, or is it just merely hate crimes? So please look forward to those three segments. The first one, as I said, it is called Why Vele. The second one is called African Diplomat. And the third one is called World in View. For now, we officially welcome you to Dialogue Sessions with Toki Mohoto. Please enjoy the song We Are the World from USA for Africa.
A time when we heed a certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying. Oh, when it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all. We can't go on pretending day by day that someone somewhere will soon make a change. We are a part of God's great big family, and the truth
Capital 88.1 FM.
Welcome back to Capital Radio. The show is Dialogue Sessions with Toki Muhoto. We are broadcasting live from Durban, South Africa. As I said earlier on, you can look forward to 3 segments on the show. The first one, which is called Why Vele. We profile topical issues that are currently trending and happening in South Africa. This starts usually at 3:05 up until 4:20. The next segment is called The African Diplomat. Here we look at issues that are affecting the African continent. We look at trendsetters, pacemakers, innovators, as well as leaders who can drive Africa toward its glorified destination. And the last segment is called World in View. We focus on topical issues that are trending on a global stage. As I promised you earlier on, I'm now joined by my 2 guests, Vuyisile Mshutulu and Leslie Dikeni. The topic we're going to be discussing is South African cultural and creative industries, which seems to have the poverty of ideas as well as absent leadership. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on Capital Radio. How do you do today?
No, thanks, Ndate Mohoto, and greetings to the listeners. We are doing the best with what we have and how we can today. Thank you.
Great stuff. I see Leslie Dikeni there is still changing positions. He's trying to connect with me. I'm not sure what's happening in the background there. I think he's trying to look for the best possible position, but it's fine. So normally what we do, Mr. Mshutulu, on the show, the dialogue sessions, what dialogue sessions is, we try to look at topical issues in SA, but most importantly, invite experts who understand the topic better and unpack it for the usual citizens, because normally what we find in SA, I think in certain quarters of the world as well, we see a bit of news bites, but nobody gives us a chance to understand or unpack it further. So here we try and look at the issue, unpack it from the roots so that any person who watches the show or is currently listening as we are streaming live understands why the topic is trending and topical. Please, as a way of introduction, whilst we wait for Mr. Dikeni to join us, do a brief intro in terms of who you are, what your career focus is, and why is it that I felt necessary to have you on board today.
Well, thanks a lot. It's really an honor for us to be part of this discussion. It's an important one given where we are as a country, My name is Vuyisile Mshutulu, and I am the Director for Arts, Culture and Heritage in the city of Johannesburg. I've been in the creative industries for a very long time. I've worked in various capacities, whether it is arts administration, policy making, and management of the arts. So essentially, that's by way of background who I am. I started in the performing arts, but gradually worked in the visual and arts and craft side, a bit of in design as well, until I worked in arts administration and policy making, both at a social level, but also in an economic capacity from an economic development perspective. So that's me in a nutshell.
I think most people have a misapprehension of the value of creative arts and what it means for a nation like South Africa. We know that art has an element or some elements of therapy to it. We know that also without creative arts, there cannot be holistic human development. What in your experience is the right definition of the cultural and creative industry?
Well, to understand the cultural and creative industries, it is important for us to understand, the arts, because the cultural and creative industries derive from the arts, which is basically the creative expression of people's innate creativity, or as a result of their cultural socialization and orientation, So that's basically where I would start. And art is basically an expression of creativity in either a tangible or an intangible form. And such role has got an impact, in our immediate environment, but also broadly in society. So to summarize the meaning of the arts or the cultural and creative industry is not an easy task, but I think we may be able to understand its value if you look at, three major components. Firstly, our history. Secondly, our existential reality. But thirdly, our aspirational reality. So then if you take those three components, my sort of definition or at least explanation of what the arts is and what its value is would be that the arts help us to reflect more honestly on our history, our existential reality, but more importantly on our aspirations as a nation. It is through the arts that we can have a vivid memory of our history, a sound grasp of our existential reality, and whilst we imagine a reality we would like to aspire to. The question though we must ask is whether or not the artistic content in the country today, is a reflection or a true reflection of our colonial history, and whether or not the arts are playing an effective role in building an understanding of our existential and lived experience, and what role the arts plays in decolonizing our lived experience. And when it is said that the future of the Black child is bleak in this country, what role does the arts play in shaping the imagination and the aspiration of that Black child? So we must always remember that the arts, have been has been a strong influence or instrument of freedom, for agitating for freedom, but also in the same vein, the arts has been a pliable weapon of coloniality, of apartheid, of oppression, So there's that duality that we must interrogate in understanding the value and the form and the shape of the arts in the sort of South African society. But the creative and cultural industries are an essential part of any nation, especially a nation that takes itself seriously. The arts play a critical role in shaping the identity of nations, in education, in spirituality, and of course in creative expression, which we find through which we find entertainment, or what many may call edutainment. So, given its ability to galvanize people, the arts remains as central, to the fight for freedom, in as much as it is an instrument that was used in the past to negate freedom. So my sense is that the creative and cultural industries derive its capital and its meaning from the arts and the culture of the people, and such capital can be categorized, in my view, in three main forms. The firstly would be the social capital. Secondly would be spiritual capital, but also economic capital. Now, we have seen in South Africa that the overemphasis has been on the economic capital of the creative and cultural industries, without looking at the deeper understanding of the social capital, but also more importantly, the spiritual capital. So in a nutshell, those are some of the things that can help us navigate the meaning and the value of the creative and cultural industries in South Africa.
I see.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that explanation. It's quite broad, and it gives us a purview into what it is exactly that we call the CCI sector. I see Leslie Tigeni has joined us. For those who are watching whilst we're streaming live, his name is not Muelela Cele. I think it's the connection he's using. I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself, and then I'll shoot with my question.
Me?
Obviously, yes, of course.
I am less than Kolisiti. And sorry, I'm not so good in these technological things, modernity is beyond me, but I'm a consumer of modernity. So, okay, I'm not Kolisiti. I'm an author. I'm an urban sociologist. In short, I've authored a couple of books. I don't want to mention them. You can mention them. One is Poverty of Ideas, which I think I actually like because the theme that you have chosen is about the book as well. And already there, we are treading into key critical questions that we pose in the book. And that is, what is an artist?
Mm, mm.
What is an intellectual? In the book, I explain that. But for now, let's stick to the topic that you've asked me and invited me to. And by the way, I've met many journalists who interviewed me. There are some that I discard. There are some that I discard because they are not critical journalists. I think you're a beautiful journalist. So I thank you for that. So that's what really I do. Currently, I used to work, I live in Paris, I live in Norway, and so on, so on, so on, around the world. But the most important thing, I think, for this conversation is the fact that I'm an urban sociologist, and in the book that I wrote, Poverty of Ideas, I'm doing the second section of the book, which is going to be called Music, Agency, and Power, which I examine the very same topic that you are asking us to do or to discuss. But most importantly, as well, is the fact that I'm using this book and this opportunity to expand into what I wrote into Poverty of Ideas.
Great stuff. We're still going to zoom into that. Let me just quickly shift to Vuyisile. Vuyisile, given our skewed resource allocation and sometimes racially biased funding models, how should the SA creative arts sector, particularly when you focus on the PDI bracket for those who were previously disadvantaged, appraise current funding models, the set challenges that have followed from there on, and then craft solutions to equitably distribute these resources?
Well, firstly, when we talk about concepts such as inequality or equity, we have to understand the root of the problem. So the question of whether or not resource allocation is skewed, racially biased, is immersed in inequality. Similarly, also the question of whether or not the institutions that have been tasked with the allocation of resources for the arts are effective or non-effective, has to be linked to the root cause. And my understanding of the root cause is that the problems that are engulfing the country currently are not questions of exclusion, of the majority by the minority. They find their root in the invasion and dispossession of the natives in this country. And therefore one has to have a appreciation of that history in locating and understanding the problems as they manifest currently. So when we talk about the ineffectiveness of state institutions that are tasked with the distribution of resources for the creative and cultural industries, we must first understand that the character and architecture of the state in terms of was a given rise in terms of the Act of Parliament passed in Britain on the 20th of September 1909, and that act essentially said that gave permission for the formation of the Union of South Africa, which ultimately took shape on the 31st of May 1910. So one has to ask, why was it necessary that after the Dutch and the British convened in Vereeniging and reached a settlement, why was it necessary for them to take that to a British Parliament for the formation of the Union of South Africa to take shape? So in essence, the reason is that it was to make sure, to verify and to ensure that the intention for establishing the state is to protect and preserve the interest of the colonizer under the management of the colonizer at the time. So in essence, what we inherited in 1994 is a state not established, by the native, nor with the consent of the native, nor for the benefit of the native, and it is for that reason that we have systemic inequality, because the state in its current form was not intended to change the existential reality or even to meet the aspirations of Black people, you know. So that's where now you have to locate the problem. But if you localize the problem insofar as the creative and the cultural uh, 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 industries are concerned, is that the cultural and creative industries are a microcosm or a microcosmic reflection of that structural reality that I've just painted. So you therefore find that you know, the inequality that exists in the cultural and creative industry exists primarily because there is this structural flaw that led to the formation of the state, and by extension the state to serve colonial rather than, you know, the interest of the citizens. Secondly, and lastly, you would recall that during apartheid, you know, culture was central to the strategy of the oppressive regime at the time, you know, and skewed funding models were legislated and they were more deliberate than anything. And therefore, what we're experiencing in what I term a neo-apartheid era, because the false notion that apartheid ended in 94 has to be debunked. So we are in a neo-apartheid era. So that experience should come as no surprise that we still have that legacy of the skewed funding models that exist in the country, you know. And the situation will persist for as long as we don't attend to the structural architecture that gave rise to the state and its coloniality. So the root cause for me is that the polity that gives rise to this inequality or this reality is an outcome of coloniality, and we have to find ways of dealing with that before we deal with the symptoms of the problem, which present themselves as, you know, skewed funding models, inequality, exclusion of artists, you know, and the selection of one content over the other. So that for me is the root of the problem. Thank you.
Great stuff. Let's come back to you, Ntate Dikeni. I'm almost tempted to call you Dr. Dikeni or Prof, and I remember that we're not in France. So since we're in SA, allow me to use the name Leslie, even though I have my own reservation because in my own culture, obviously, it's not allowed. From the inception of the so-called democratic dispensation, right? What we've seen, the arts, heritage, and culture sector has never enjoyed autonomy. What do I mean by that? As far back as we can recall, it used to be paired with science and technology, right? And now we have it still paired with sports. It now becomes sports, arts, and culture. My question is, why do you feel this pairing has happened, and why has it not enjoyed any degree of autonomy such that it becomes an export-worthy commodity?
First of all, let's respond to Wisile.
Sure.
Beautiful Wisile, I love you, my brother. My first response, Wisile, before I continue to say any other thing I'm going to be saying in responding to the question that is being given to me now, let's first agree that we are in a post-colonial state. We are the last in the whole continent that is post-colonial. So we're not talking about a colonial state anymore. We are talking about a post-colonial state. That's very important to understand, right? Before I respond to the kind of question that you're asking. The second point around that issue as well is the fact that we need to connect theory and practice. And I like Wisile because I think he's the kind of a bureaucrat or a technocrat or a state functionary who can at least be able to connect theory and practice. Because the many do not do that. So thanks to you, Wisile. But let's go into it, Wisile. I think let's address the question. And I'm going to say these points just generically, and then you can, because all the questions that you're raising are interlinked, interconnected.
Definitely.
Right? The first, I think the question that you are asking for is how does the state intervene currently? Because it relates state intervention practices, right, within the domain of the arts and culture sector. I'm preempting your questions, but I can tell you now that that's what we need to be asking. Therefore, then we have to ask the question, does the state have to intervene? Must it not intervene? Let's forget the liberals who would say there must be no state intervention in the arts. There must be state intervention in the arts, and correctly so in our South African context, which Vuyisile himself articulated of colonialism, apartheid, and so on and so on. Where you had a Gerard Sekoto, great painter, found himself where? Erstwhile exiled in Paris. Dudu Pukwana. Even Magungu Ngozi in the jazz music wrote a song called Jiga. Where do you find him? It was banned in South Africa. Brenda Fassie's song in South Africa was produced. Mankuku's song never ended up having to produce it in London. These are the kind of things that I think we're talking about. So in that situation, in that crisis, you need a state to intervene in any other domain, right? Whether it is in culture, in economics, right? In any other social life, you need a state. Can you imagine, let's simplify it metaphorically. Can you imagine a country without robots, traffic lights? The cars will be killing each other. So you need a state. So let's be clear about that. So that's where the state becomes important. Now, where do we find the problem? Because the issue here is that, metaphorically speaking, you can build a dam, and then when the dam leaks, like in the village, and then you put plastic into it. That's not gonna work. What you need to do, to borrow the reader's words, is to deconstruct and rebuild the dam. And that is our problem. We need to examine how the state intervenes properly, and there are certain things that the state must just discard and remove completely and rebuild. So that's, I've got more to say, but I want Vuyisile to come.
Vuyisile, Prof was trying to, I say the word Prof with due respect and due regard. We're trying to look at the need or the logic behind having paired the Department of Arts, Culture and Heritage with Science and Technology, and then it now is paired with sports. Why does it always have to be a surrogate of sort? Can it not be autonomous? What does it mean for a country like South Africa with a precarious past? And what does it mean for our future as well if our cultural economy is not valued in this essence? Isn't it the very reason why we find ourselves in this very quagmire that has engulfed the state as well as the creative economy?
Well, thank you for that question. I also want to start where Ubabu Dikeni left off when he said that we must accept, and to use this exact phraseology, we must accept that we live in a post-colonial state, and my contention is that we must not just accept without interrogating, and so my discipline is always to interrogate things before I accept them, and I think that to say that South Africa is a post-colonial state is an incomplete characterization, of the reality of what South Africa as a state is. And I think that the reason why the debate for decolonialization arises is primarily because the legacy of coloniality is still very much prevalent, and therefore also the fact that there are notions such as neo-colonialism that arises means therefore that colonialism has mutated into different forms of coloniality. And we have to understand that as we interface with our understanding of the state, its function, its role, and its legitimacy, because often we only want to interrogate the function of the state without looking at the legitimacy of the state. So my contention is that the state, this polity, South Africa, came into being, you know, in a way that is not legitimate. Uh, and when we talk about the polity, we have to create a distinction between the polity South Africa and the territory South Africa, which is the geographic location South Africa. So and that is for that reason that the polity is in control of the territory, but the natives are not in control of the territory and all other areas of human endeavor, including the arts. So therefore, to answer your question about why is it that ACH is not, or the Department of Arts and Culture is not linked to the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, And I would say that firstly, to preface the question, is that the country does not have a vision for the arts, let alone for the creative economy. We may debate whether or not this is coincidental or intentional, but the poor focus and investment in the arts is, in my view, informed by the understanding of the power of the arts. The power has the arts to effect, the arts has got the power to effect fundamental change. And that is a fact we must never forget when we interface with how is it that the arts are poorly resourced. So whether arts and arts practitioners have the latitude to reflect critically on the status quo, they inevitably will sharpen the contradictions and inspire revolutionary change, as we have seen in other states. So one of the best ways to ensure that that does not happen is to constrain the enabling environment at a structural level, at least, and this is effected through poor funding of the arts, poor infrastructure, limiting artistic education, or even eradicating artistic education at the basic education level, and so on. And all of these methods are intended to silence the critical voice in the arts. And when you have limited resources floating around in the creative and cultural industries, you therefore also have limited and guarded access to opportunities, especially market opportunities. So you can control the content, by dispensing patronage to those that are not a threat to the status quo, to those that will not inspire fundamental change, in essence. And again, the actions may not be as overt as they were in the examples, to borrow your examples, Baba, that, artists like Ubabu Gerard Sokoto were exiled. Umamu, Uzenzile Makeba was also exiled for the ideas that they had as artists. The actions may not be so overt, but they may be more covert and very difficult to detect. So in essence, coloniality self-preserves by strangling the voice of the artist that is driven by the notion, or at least the aspiration, of decoloniality. So whether or not the Department of Arts and Culture is linked to education, health, and defense, which gets the biggest budgets, or whether it is linked to international relations, which has got the most exposure globally, it will not be effective because it has the problem of nullifying the decision, because the problem of nullifying the decision that was taken in 1909 that gave birth to this colonial entity, and also how it has mutated into a neo-colonial entity, will be at risk if arts, culture, and heritage in this country can be more effective, because it will build a sense of identity, a sense of self-awareness, a sense of self-love amongst the natives, which are the ingredients, that will fuel the need for fundamental change. So the problem is compounded by the fact that also there is a dearth of visionary leadership in spite of the fact that we have pockets of excellence here and there, but at a macro level, there is really a deficiency in terms of visionary leadership that can get us to where we need to be and not being associated with another department or another state entity. Thank you.
Great stuff. Leslie, let me zoom into this absence of leadership. Some have gone as far as calling for the axing of Nathi Mthethwa. Basically, they're saying his tenure is demonstrably that of an absent and not so innovative leader, which has culminated in the current challenge that the sector finds itself in, where you find certain creatives, for example, staging a sit-in at the offices of the National Arts Council, and there hasn't been any forthright or decisive reaction from the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on ACH, and also the minister hasn't demonstrated any level of will as well as interest in turning things around. Do you feel that this is partly because there's an absence of leadership in the arts, culture, and heritage sector?
They have enough time to respond to this question because you see, I think I hear where you're going to, and I hear where Brazil is going to. First, let's clean up with Vusi. And Vusi, let's clean up by accepting that question. We are in a post-colonial state with its differentiators. Like in the rest of the continent, in Latin America, Cuba, and so on. We have to admit that the failure to admit that is a failure that results to us a problem. Is it? You know what is the problem? Is that then you allow current regimes that exist in the post-colonial state in Africa and elsewhere, right? Room to maneuver and to use history, right, as a justification for non-deliverance. I'm not a bureaucrat, I don't work in the state. So be careful of that. But let's leave that because we're not doing justice to the current discourse. That debate I had with Mamdani some time ago. For now, Mahmoud Mamdani. So we can go to that. And I would ask you to read the book by Mamdani on the same question, right? That's where I stand. But it's good that you have clarified where you stand, and I know where you stand. And I know where I stand. Let's move on. For the current discourse, because that's the issue. When I read the briefing was about the current issue, right? Now let's, as I said, we must deconstruct, and then we must have theoretical concepts to be able to solve a problem, you see? When someone is sick, you don't give him discipline. When he's got a stomach ache, you give him something for the stomach ache. And that's our problem currently. We give discipline to, metaphorically speaking. So now let's define the arts. And that's where I want to come. And I'm gonna borrow my words from the Italian, Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, on the notion of sites of struggles in society. Right? So Gramsci's words, to paraphrase it, is that in society, we've got different sites of struggles. Education, for example, is a site of struggle. There's an institution in education. It's a domain, but it's a domain which exists within the site of struggle. Now, within that context, you have different power relations that exist within that domain, within any institution. So the arts, for example, would be a site of struggle. Let's forget the other sides of struggle. Even in the church, you have sites of struggle because you've got a priest who's a hierarchy and so on, who follows him and so on and so on. So within the arts domain, we've got the same problem too, right? So to us, we should treat and see the arts as a site of struggle, a struggle of ideas that exists within there. And let's not forget competition that exists within there. And I agree with him that it then for them, the art sector produces different forms of commodities that exist in society, which capital uses. That again, when I go back to the notion of state intervention, that is where the state must intervene in that domain so that there can be fair play. But we must also allow, which I agree on, that there must be contestations of ideas, competition in the arts. Gerard Sekoto must be better than Picasso, right? But we must also think in the process at the same time. Okay, am I running around, moving far for your time? And so that's the domain of arts. Okay, for the sake of time, because I can go on and go on. Okay, so like I said, the factory is the now the key question you are asking me again. So that for me, the role of artists and arts is very important for the country. And in fact, to me, as I attribute in poverty over years, is that artists are actually intellectuals of a special type to me. And that is a value that we must give to them. And shamefully so, in our country, I don't think that is done. Hence, poverty of ideas. For me, Gerard Sekoto should be regarded as an intellectual. He can create beyond many of us and the pseudo-intellectuals mushrooming in the country, on television and wherever. His works, till today, speaks for themselves. That is what artists are to me. Now let's ask the question, do we need to, the minister or what? I think this idea of chopping, that's not the issue. Once again, we are not dealing with the issue structurally. What we need to do is to deal with these issues in a structural way, right? You can't just change a minister, put this one, put that one. There must be systems and structures in place that deconstruct the current situation and replace it with a different situation, which is what? Ministers, presidents, and whoever, and also, I mean, really to just talk about the current minister, it's useless, because are we so confident that the current regime will win elections forever and will be there forever? No, we're not. Yeah? Democratic pluralism must exist. So let's agree that that's not the solution. The solution is to deal with the issue structurally.
Gentlemen, just a pause there, a second. Zoom is reminding me that the time I had set has been fast spent. I do apologize for that. I would have liked for us to unpack this further. I'm certain Vuisid, as well as yourself, Ntate Dikeni, you have a lot more to say. I feel that time, obviously, or this kind of platform is always never enough. But thank you so much for sharing your views. I hope we can reset another time where there's more time allocation that's available to us, and we can unpack these details further. Thank you so much, and do have a good day ahead. We apologize again for that. I think sometimes when you speak with intellectuals, you are bound to not have enough time, because you need to look at something from a theoretical and also a practical point of view, and the nuances there too, and that more often than not, takes more time than is always allocated. Please enjoy a song by Teddy Pendergrass as a way of saying thank you to Vuisile Mshutulu, as well as Leslie Dikeni. The song is called Wake Up Everybody.
Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more back thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. They're the ones who's coming up, and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. Na, 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 na. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it, girl, just you and me. Wake up all the doctors, make the old people well. They're the ones who suffer and who catch all the hair. But they don't have so very long before their judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away? Wake up all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we could do it if we all lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our minds. Surely things will work out, they do it every time. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. Na, 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 na. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it, girl, just you and me. Change it, yeah, just you and me. Change it, yeah, change it. Can't do it alone, do it alone. Need some help, y'all, y'all. Can't do it alone, can't do it alone. Yeah, yeah. Wake up, everybody. Wake up, everybody. Need a little help, y'all. Yes, indeed. Need a little help. Say it, boy. Need some help, y'all. Change the world, what it used to be. Can't do it alone. Need some help, yeah. Need some help, yeah. Wake up, everybody. Get up, get up, get up, get up. Wake up. Come on, come on. Wake up, everybody. Teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen what you have to say. Wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in there. No more back to thinking. Time for thinking ahead. Come on now. Wake up, everybody. I'm talking about don't push up. Stop pushing that don't push. Don't use up. Stop using the dope. Wake up. Yeah. Well,
We apologize for that. I don't know what happened there. Again, I was listening to the song by Teddy Pendergrass. It's called Wake Up Everybody. Before that, we were speaking with Leslie Tikeni as well as Vuisilem Shutulu. We were asking the question, does the South African cultural and creative industry suffer from a poverty of ideas as well as absent leadership. I was just playing you a song once again to take us through to our next segment, but for now, please enjoy Bill Withers. The song is called Lovely Day, after which we're going to be ushering you into our next segment called The African Diplomat. We're going to be looking at the crisis currently engulfing Mozambique, what it is exactly that's currently happening there. I think there are so many mixed reactions or views around it, but the expert who's a political analyst based in Mozambique is going to share with us what he has seen, what he understands, and what is it that we can now know differently regarding the situation. Please enjoy the song by Bill Withers. It's called Lovely Day.
When I wake up in the morning, love, and the sunlight hurts my eye, and something without warning, love, bears heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face, when someone else instead of me always seems to know the way, then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face, and when someone else instead of me always seems to know the way, then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. I just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day.
That was a song by Bill Withers from the United States of America, and the music is called Lovely Day. It is exactly what we are having here on Capital Radio 88.1 FM. You are still with Toki Mohoto on Capital Radio's Dialogue Sessions. We are now going to be in conversation with another gentleman from Mozambique. His name is Yasin Muhammad. We are going to be speaking regarding the crisis currently engulfing Mozambique. I'm sure for those who do watch the news, they have seen what is currently happening there, and they have their own views regarding what is happening and how can it be resolved. We've seen also that SADC is even thinking of managing the situation differently. Some have called it an outright war. Some are calling it terrorism. Some are calling it resource wars. And some are basically saying it's just minute sectarian violence. I see that Mr. Yasin has invited other people here who are joining us. I may ask them just not to be available on our meeting so that we host the discussion by ourselves. They are welcome to listen in. Mr. Yasin, I think you can hear me. He's sipping his coffee there, enjoying a bit of it. There we go. Mr. Yasin, can you hear me? I think it's just listening in. Mr. Yasin, can you hear me? He now sees me. You'll forgive us with the connection. He's seeing me. I'm just doing sign language here, trying to indicate that he can speak now. We're trying to look at the crisis currently happening in Mozambique, and we're asking the question, is it just really sporadic terrorism, or there are actually resource wars taking place? You'll hear as the conversation unfolds why some may say this is about resources that the country has. We know that Mozambique is quite rich in natural resources, particularly oil and natural gas. We're going to be unpacking this conversation now. Mr. Mohammed, can you hear me? Mr. Mohammed, can you hear me? I'm trying to indicate, yeah, can you hear me? You can just indicate there. Please switch. There we go. Can you hear? Perfect. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. Now it's clear. How do you do, sir?
Hello?
Perfect. I can hear you now loud and clear. How do you do today?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. You may talk. I can hear you. Continue. There we go. The volume is much better now. Can you hear me now? Your sound is a bit faint, and the listeners, I'm sure, are wondering what's currently happening because they also can't hear a thing. Can you hear me on your part?
Can you hear me?
Now it's perfect.
Yeah,
now
maybe it's from my side.
Yes, now I can
It's
hear.
okay now?
Yeah, now it's perfect. Perfect. How do you do today?
Okay. Well, just concerned, I'm doing fine, but concerned is actually one of the biggest issues now, not just for Africa, but for the world.
Definitely. Everyone is quite anxious about the situation in Mozambique. Justifiably so. If you look at the makeup of SADC, Mozambique is just a neighbor of South Africa, and we know that in Africa there's an abundance of resources, right? And one is asking himself, are these just sporadic terrorist attacks, or there are resource wars currently taking place in Mozambique? Before we go deeper into the conversation, please make an introduction into who you are and why is it that I felt you were the better candidate to host this debate with me.
Thank you for the opportunity once again. My name is Mohamed Yasin. I'm from Mozambique. I'm a political analyst. I was a former vice president of the International Affairs Committee at the parliament for the last 5 years, representing the CEDAW African Union as a coordinator for Southern Africa on diaspora. And I'm also the executive director for Religion for Peace in Southern Africa. I'm one of the people outspoken about what's happening in Cabo Delgado for so many reasons. One of the reasons is that it started a while we at the parliament were actually following the issue, which I'm sure that other people are following now, but it started while I was heading that committee.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. And you're quite correct when you're saying the situation in Mozambique, especially for an outsider, it may be a bit of a confusing state of affairs. For someone who lives there, give us your sense of what has been happening from the time these insurgencies started.
Well, let's start by saying that for the last three and a half years, we started to see some movements in the northern part of Mozambique. We may call it insurgency, we may call it terrorism, we may call it jihadism, which I normally think that those are three different definitions when it comes to what's happening in Mozambique. One, we look at it as a result of internal division. I'm not talking about political division, but I'm talking about different levels of social division. Poor people and richer people. And the second, it may be a result of a lack of opportunity for the youth in the province of Cabo Delgado. Likely, for the last years, Cabo Delgado became one of the most important regions in Africa because of what we have as a gas, which makes Mozambique one of the fourth largest reserve in the world. But normally this comes with a price. The first price is that wherever we have gas in Africa, we normally have problem, which becomes, we call it a gift, which comes with a higher price. And the second is that opportunities for the youth in Cabo Delgado is one also of the major problems. And then we may talk somehow about the radicalization in the same area. So we have Cabo Delgado as a compacted area where what is happening on that place is totally different from what's happening in the rest of the country. We have also drug trafficking in Cabo Delgado. And we also have human trafficking in Cabo Delgado. We have also the trafficking of one of the best resources that we have in Mozambique, which is wood. And we will also have ruby and gold in the same province. Let's say that province is blessed, but that blessing it does not go to the people of Cabo Delgado. Being that also one of the reasons why we started to have that problem. Besides, it's good to mention that between Cabo Delgado and Tanzania, we have an open border. As to say that 70% of the border between Mozambique and Tanzania, it's an open border. It's very much different who comes in and who goes out. When it comes to insurgency and terrorism, it's well known that in Central Africa, we have from Uganda, Congo, Kenya, Tanzania, and now Mozambique, which is actually the battleground, we have people moving, some people that they came from Somalia. As we don't have enough control in the borders, we don't control the trafficking of all those resources that I've mentioned. We don't have real government in place. Definitely, the problem is there. Is what we're facing today.
It's quite a tense situation. I know also that Total, a French energy giant, celebrated signing an MOU with the government of Mozambique, where they're going to be making liquefied natural gas. And from there on, then this spate of attacks started to increase. But let's look at the economic aspect of it. How do you feel that the halting of this project out of fear that these insurgents are going to destroy the infrastructure that's going to assist the economy of Mozambique. How do you feel that this has impacted the country?
Well, let's start by saying that Total has control in terms of what must be done when it comes to investing in Mozambique, especially on that area of oil and gas. But the main problem is Total cannot say that they can be safe in an area where, first of all, the resettlement of people was not well done. And people were settled to give space to Total. It's not possible to say that, okay, this investment can be safe while the majority of the youth from the same area, they don't have opportunities in terms of job. We cannot say that opportunity is well accepted for the people of Cabo Delgado if most of the revenue are understood that will be coming to Maputo, not to the province itself. So I also understand that although Total has all that investment in place, but let's look at the social environment within the project. That's what is lacking.
I hear you. And also, it's very important. I think we've seen this challenge over the years where multinational companies come into the country with foreign direct investment, but there's little to no improvement that takes place at a domestic level. Some of it becomes just mere cosmetics or political rhetoric when these exchanges or MOUs are entered into, but people on the ground have a different view of what's currently happening. Also, one has said that there's over 60 billion rands, right, at stake, and $60 billion, at stake regarding these. How do you then match these with the recovery the country was making from COVID lockdown to now these terrorist attacks? How is the two being managed currently?
Well, in a matter of fact, when it comes to Cabo Delgado, no one is talking about COVID. You cannot talk about COVID in an environment where it's unstable. People from Cabo Delgado cannot be tested now. As you can see, we have about 800,000 refugees now.
Wow.
In different provinces, people that came from Cabo Delgado. The number is mounting day after day. COVID is not an issue today in Cabo Delgado. People cannot sleep because they don't have shelter. People are running to the jungle in order to protect themselves. People don't have food. People are marching more than a week in order to be safe. So when we talk about the COVID, you can pull any kind of money that you want. It won't help Cabo Delgado today. As to say that even the central government does not think that Cabo Delgado today, the COVID is an issue, because it is not. No one is in Cabo Delgado and in most of the province of districts of Cabo Delgado speaking about COVID. There are provinces in Cabo Delgado that there's an absence of government. So which means that other sectors of the government, they're not there to implement any kind of program.
It's quite scary. Also, there's the dynamic now, as you rightfully stated, regarding the porous border between Tanzania and Mozambique. But also, hasn't these terrorist attacks also heightened the likelihood of human trafficking? What is your sense in terms of that?
Well, that's one of the points that I normally raise in my speech is that you have a province that is fertile when it comes to any kind of traffic. You talk about human trafficking, for example, people that have been trafficked from Cabo Delgado, from Musimbo da Praia, for example, that go to Tanzania, from Tanzania up to Congo, to the mining sector, especially the children going to the mining sector. So you don't expect in a province that does not have borders that those kind of trafficking can be controlled. You have in Cabo Delgado that people are using the ports in order to introduce heroin and cocaine. That goes back to Palma, and some of it goes back to Europe, and some of it goes back to South Africa. So as you don't have a control on that province it's very much difficult to follow any kind of trafficking.
Quite scary indeed. I know that the United Nations Human Rights Commission had estimated that internal migration alone may around June reach around 1 million, meaning those 1 million people are internally displaced. Some have run away from their homes,
Yes.
and obviously life has halted essentially for them. And you introduced a very difficult dynamic where you're saying, how can people be tested or even be inoculated for COVID when one, they don't even have jobs, number two, there's no nutrition, and thirdly, there's a serious risk and threat to their lives. How do you see this playing out at the African Union level?
Well, I think before we go back to African Union, let's understand what exactly is happening in the region.
Please share with us.
For some reason, only this week we're capable to have SADC making certain decisions, which I, as an analyst of international affairs, I would say that that decision taken by SADC now on this meeting held now in Mozambique somehow does not help Mozambique today. Why is that? Is that African Union to intervene in any kind of support what is happening in Mozambique, it needs first of all to understand what exactly SADC is doing and what is lacking, right? And as SADC still hanging around when it comes to the major problem that we face in Mozambique, definitely we will not have support from any other structure, either being a continent or outside of the continent. If SADC is saying today that yes, in 21 days, we will send a team to Mozambique to analyze what exactly is happening, then I'm saying that we're wasting time. Because we've been into this for the last 4 years. What exactly SADC did? And again, let's not forget that SADC normally plays the silent diplomacy when it comes to the regional problems. Do we have enough structure in SADC in order to help Mozambique on this type of insurgency or in this type of terrorism? It's difficult to say, but we don't have. Then what's the next step? Can Mozambique look for other supporters in order to finish or in order to help us overpassing SADC? No, we cannot, because we have regional protocols.
Yes.
Then what exactly we're going to do? If you go back to SADC, in matter of fact, only 2 countries have a capability to face this type of terrorism, which is South Africa and Angola. Then, can we go bilaterally to convince those 2 countries to support us before SADC taking a step? The response is not. Then we're in an angle that we cannot move.
This also leads me to ask this question. South Africa has an investment in Mozambique through Sasol, right? Sasol also is heavily invested in the natural resources sector, particularly for oil and gas. And now you have Angola, which together with Mozambique are ex-colonial clients or states of Portugal. Do you see Portugal coming in to say, I cannot allow my investments to be decimated by terrorists? On the other hand, we also have ExxonMobil from America. Do we see America from their AFRICOM base in Botswana coming in also to say we are protecting our interest here?
Well, the position of the government, as the president is speaking, is that we don't want so many different forces in Cabo Delgado. And he even said, the president said days ago, that although SADC can decide wherever they're going to decide, he understands that only Mozambicans can intervene in terms of army. And now there's a point here, is that wherever there is an American investment, the United States allow themselves to intervene wherever they want. That is a common law from the United States since 1973. Another point is that Total is giving also an opportunity to create their own their own guards in order to protect the project. The point is, those two steps is exactly what we've always been avoiding. If we have the resources in Mozambique, the only way of controlling the resources is actually to have Mozambican troops protecting it. But let's go back to the African examples. We only have one example of locals protecting local investment, which is in Morocco. It's actually successful. Why is that? Morocco has created an environment where the people surrounding the investment themselves are controlling the investments. So which means that they're getting the revenue of the investment as the local people around the investment. And we actually went in a different way.
Mr. Yasin, I think your network has frozen you there. I'm not sure why. I think it's trying to connect again.
Are you there?
Oh, there we go. You just got disrupted there a bit.
was
You may
saying that
continue. Sure.
What we're having now as an opportunity for Mozambique in order to come out from what is happening there is either accept the opportunity that's given by the United States, which they're ready to intervene, but also Portugal, as you have mentioned, already sent a team of Marines in order to prepare Mozambican troops in order to face the insurgency. Yes, Portugal is one of the biggest funders in Mozambique. But as you mentioned, South Africa also has an interest. The point is South Africa going to intervene bilaterally or will follow SADC rules? I think that's the situation that we expect to see in the end of this month.
It's quite scary because when you consider the level at which these international players have converged on Mozambican soil and each one protecting their own interest, I wonder how much of a gap they are going to leave for these insurgents to zoom into other villages that are more prone to risk and are not yet as heavily guarded as, for example, Cap Delgado, right? And to this, I then ask the question, if South Africa does intervene bilaterally, how does it affect the stability of SADC as a whole?
Well, South Africa has a counter interest. It's a direct interest in Mozambique because of Sasol, right? So if we allow South Africa without a commandment from SADC, then we'll be making a mistake. As I say, South Africa, the interest of South Africa shall not overpass the decision taken by SADC. But before we have an example where SADC has mandated South Africa and Angola to intervene in Congo. It may happen that this time also, South Africa and Zimbabwe, probably and Angola, I have the mandate of SADC to intervene. But as our president is saying, he does not want foreign troops in the place. You think that countries can help with intelligence, but not really sending troops into Mozambique.
What, from your own experience or what people have heard, is the current makeup of this terrorist outfit called ASJW fighters? What do you know about them? Are they in any way linked to ISIS? Are they in any way linked to Al-Qaeda? Are they in any way linked even to any of these terrorists that we've seen ravaging North Africa in the form of Al-Shabaab?
Well, my field of international affairs is the Middle East. I did my studies in the Middle East, and I'm a well known of what is happening that side. And 3 years ago, I was in Iraq on a meeting where we were told that we will start to have insurgency in Mozambique. Let's don't forget that ISIS has been defeated in Iraq and is pulling away from Syria. And now we have a different type of ISIS from Congo, right? Even if you try to see the recent report given by the Americans. They're saying that Mozambique has been attacked by ISIS from Southern Africa.
Wow.
There is a footprint of ISIS in Cabo Delgado. There's a footprint of ISIS in Cabo Delgado. But I normally say that when it comes to terrorism, terrorists doesn't find heaven in any country if they don't have support for local people.
Yes.
The point is, how can local people support terrorists? I've been following the steps of this insurgency. Recently, I was in Zanzibar and I was in Mombasa, where the insurgency, in fact, that attacking Mozambique came from. So we're actually having a regional problem that it may look small, as in Mozambique now, but maybe tomorrow it will reach the golden land, which is South Africa.
Yes, true.
Yeah, so there we need to be very much careful. Remember in 2010, so there was a sign in South Africa that during the World Cup, we will have some attacks from insurgency.
Yes, I
that
remember.
was during. So what exactly avoids those terrorists go to South Africa in real terms?
That's a very good point. Also, when you speak of you're saying essentially there cannot be a terrorist outfit operating in a country without having enjoyed local support. To what extent do you feel that the radicalization of youth, owing from the idea that they are unemployed, perhaps they feel that the government doesn't have their best interests at heart, and economic opportunities are scarce, right? What do you feel is the degree to which they may feel radicalization is the way to go, and belonging to a terrorist outfit is the right form of revenge against a government they perceive to be not caring for them?
Well, I remember once our president was saying that the radicalization in northern part of Cabo Delgado, it was actually coming through one of the sheikhs from Kenya. Actually, sheikh from Mombasa actually is the one who started with radicalization. What I did, actually, I followed the steps given by the president, and I went to Mombasa, the mosque of that sheikh, in order to understand. Well, you cannot radicalize people that they have different type of opportunities. It's very much difficult.
True.
Second is that if we say that it's an Islamic radicalization, let's understand that in Cabo Delgado, the government did not intervene much when it comes to schools, education. So religion played that role. If you're saying today that the religion is radicalized youth, then what exactly you have to do is actually to counter the narrative, to change that narrative in order to prevent violent extremism. But that will take time. What I'm normally asking is that for the last 3 years, where was the intelligence service in order to understand that things are happening in Cabo Delgado? Where was SADC? Where was African Union? Today, we can hear, for example, from the US telling us the leader of that group. Why? For the last 3 years, we kept saying that we still don't have a face. So everything is failing in intelligence, not just in Mozambique, but in the region. We're waking up to a problem that it's bigger now. We're waking up to a problem that is no longer just a Mozambique problem. It stops the insurgents that they are coming from all those countries to cross to other SADC countries. Today we're asking, why is it that Tanzania is not cooperating? We all know that terrorism plays in a certain way. If you, as a country, contribute with other country to avoid the attacks of terrorism that comes, definitely they will come to your country. See what is happening with Boko Haram, for example, in Nigeria.
Yes, yes.
Cameroon and Chad, they are still over of a local problem. Why? It's because they intervened. Look what is happening with Al-Shabaab in Kenya and Uganda. Kenya and Uganda, they are also been attacked because they're having troops in Somalia. So who dares to bring troops to Mozambique knowing that it may open a door of a hell to their own countries? That it needs to be understood in a different way. You've mentioned one particular point when you said about that African may come to help. Let's understand that the SADC position when it comes to African, it is that SADC does not allow African to operate and base within the region, which means that the decision taken by Botswana is an unilateral position that SADC is not involved. You can go back to what we call zero road, which is the sea. Who's controlling the maritime of Mozambique today? It's France and India with the support of South Africa. So which means that even Mozambique as a country, we don't have the capability to control our own shore, let alone to control the entrance from where the major drugs from Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iran are coming from. The country is vulnerable, but also SADC is very much vulnerable.
And you mentioned a very critical point now where you're saying in the SADC region alone, there are two countries, Angola and South Africa, that may have the military might to offset the power of insurgents. When you look at the other exposed countries who are equally rich in mineral resources, do you feel that at some point we're going to see a trend? If we're now saying as far back as 2010, there were terrorist threats that South Africa heard about during the World Cup, right? But nothing obviously sufficed at that point. But now we're seeing it happening in Mozambique, and the threats are now such that the terrorists are saying if you intervene as South Africa or as a SADC member state, we are going to also come to your country because you are essentially destabilizing our efforts and plans in Mozambique. Do you sense that this threat is going to perpetuate to a point where it becomes a regional crisis beyond just Mozambique?
Yeah, look, the absence of protection, it goes back, for example, to the borders we have with Malawi, for example. If the insurgents, they get a heaven in Mozambique, nothing stops them to go to Malawi and Zimbabwe, let alone Tanzania, because now we're saying that insurgency that crossing to Mozambique through Mtwara, Tunduru, Songeya. And now we have, for example, between Mozambique and South Africa, the borders are vulnerable as well. So that threat shall not be for Mozambique alone. Mozambique, it may be used as the base.
Yes,
to spread. Because as long as insurgency occupies space, I say most of the time that this group cannot be called Al-Shabaab for one reason, is that Shabaab is not an occupying space group.
Yes.
No. While this group occupies 7 districts. So, and they stayed there. They still have a port of Musimba da Praia. Up to today, it's been more than 5 months. So it means that those groups, they're capable to create a different type of a social environment in those places where people will somehow, even forced to, they will join to the new rules of those groups, and unless they are being killed. And again, what kind of tools do we have to stop those groups of moving? We have none. You see, let me say that for the last 16 years, SADC is one of the most quiet place when it comes to internal problems of
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah, true.
And that got us sleeping. And today, we don't have a regional power like ECOWAS, for example, has. We don't have. We're trying to we're trying to bring back the defense structure of SADC. Let's not forget that if it comes to contribution, who's going to contribute financially to the defense sector in SADC? Definitely, it's going to be South Africa and Angola, because the two countries that they have somehow resources, financial resources. Does Malawi have? No. Zimbabwe is bankrupt. Tanzania, they will not do it. And Mozambique is in a struggle. Then who will contribute? Let us say that when it comes to international relations, we say countries are not friends, are based on interest.
Yes, true.
Yes, South Africa will come in because of the investment in Sasol. But what exactly that Kenya is taking back? What exactly can Angola can take back if they decide to intervene? Tanzania will not intervene. The fact is that while we have gas in Cabo Delgado, in Palma, we have the same project above in Tanzania. So if Mozambique is having a problem and Tanzania is not having, it's well done for Tanzania, peace-wise, because that project will start first than the ones we have here. Not surprised that the late president of Tanzania has said once, if Mozambique wants Tanzania to put a hand on insurgency, then they need a share from the project.
Wow.
So economical ties as well plays also a role in what's going to be next in terms of SADC.
As we conclude this needful discussion, I want to look at the role of religion in the radicalization of youth. You know, some may say the fact that a sheikh in Mombasa in Kenya has been radicalizing youth either through social media platforms, right? And you ask yourself, what is the role of social media platform in curbing such radicalization? But at the same time, the freedom of religion or to associate with a deity or a persuasion that you want. Do you feel that at some point we're now going to be fighting, there's going to be a fight rather, or a pitting against of religion against people where perhaps Christianity as well as Islam are going to be coming together, and now the other is going to be saying you are the root cause of these terrorist insurgents, and the other will be saying, but you've also done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of enabling imperialism and colonization.
Well, you've mentioned a point here which it's very important. I know Kenya very well. One. And the second point is that, yes, the Sheikh Mosque in Mombasa did radicalize their own people while it's in Nairobi. Of course, there is a common culture from Cabo Delgado, Tanzania, Congo, and Kenya, because it's a common language, which is Swahili. So definitely, illiterated people, they speak much Swahili than they can speak English or Portuguese. The absence of government structure when it comes to education in those places in Cabo Delgado helped the introduction of a different type of Islam. Yes, you don't have a regular school, but you have a madrasa.
Yes.
You have a religion school. So who is to blame? Today, we understand that, yes, those madrasas, there were plenty, and they've been radicalized by those sheikhs or those webs from the sheikh in Mombasa.
We apologize for the break in transmission there. Something has cut the connection. I do not know what it is. We do apologize to our guest there from Mozambique. You are hearing a discussion between myself and Yasin Mohammed, a political analyst who is unpacking the crisis currently engulfing Mozambique. And if you were listening, you should have heard that it won't just be a matter or a crisis that is unique, a crisis rather that is unique to Mozambique. But since South Africa is neighbors with Mozambique, you have Lesotho, you've got Zimbabwe, you've got Namibia, you've got Malawi, and all these other countries. The likelihood of it spilling over to South Africa is quite high, because you may recall also that around 2010, when South Africa hosted the first ever World Cup on African soil, there was an assumption, or there were rumors, that terrorist insurgents were planning to strike a few key national sites, which did not happen, obviously, thank goodness for that. But we are seeing a trend developing in Mozambique where resources that Africa is blessed with, it's meant to alleviate poverty, it's meant to improve our economic standing, and it's also meant to assist those who need it the most. But it's now become a case of sorts, and we don't know how this situation will unfold. Let's put Mozambique in our prayers and always hope for the best. To close off that session, I'm now going to be playing a song by Abdullah Ibrahim. It's called Manenberg. And from there on, I'm just going to be playing marathon music to make up for the time that has been lost owing to this discussion that we have. Once again, thank you for tuning into Capital Radio's dialogue session with myself, Toki Mohoto. We broadcast every Saturday from 3 up until 6. I forgot to make mention of Reshali, who is our technical producer. I'll also mention a brother of mine, Lunga Hatebe, who sometimes assists with finding some of the guests that we speak with on an international as well as local level. Please enjoy a song by Abdullah Ibrahim. It's called Manenberg. can still look forward to another discussion which is going to be focusing on something that is currently trending. We are going to be discussing from 5 o'clock with my two guests. We're going to be looking at the issue of xenophobia. Most of us may be familiar with xenophobia. Some may know Islamophobia, some know Afrophobia, but there's an emerging trend of xenophobia. This is attacks as well as hate crimes directed at Asian nationals. If you are following the news, you may have seen in some states in America where there are targeted attacks on Chinese immigrants or those who live in America. We're going to be unpacking that with my two guests on the next segment that's going to be coming up at 5. For now, please continue enjoying more music on your feel-good station. You are still on Capital Radio, and the show is called Dialogue Sessions. It happens every Saturday from 3 to 6. Also, if you're wondering how else you can tune in, you can visit us via www.capitalradio.co.za. You can also tune in via our YouTube as well as Facebook platforms. You can find us on Radio Garden app as well as Mixcloud. For now, if you're wondering where you are on
88.1 FM.
Please enjoy a song by Dave. It's called Location.
If you send me the location, then I'll be right there. And make I come check you, my baby. No time, no. And my dog is on probation. Another 5 years. We bring girls to his location. No time, no.
Send me the location. This year about vacations, flight catching, train taking. Soon as my nigga off probation. Your boyfriend's on a waiting thing, looking for one wish on a Ray J thing. I prayed that girl, outrageous thing, but she can't see cause I got shades and ting. Bare girls wanna throw shade and ting, no shade, what shade is your foundation in? Darkest grey, the shade I'm in, 49 more if your babes want sin. I had me a famous ting, goals and things, gains and things. My house party, a babe station. Girls wanna chase, it's a status thing.
If you send me the location, then I'll be right there. And make I come check you, my baby. No time, no. And my dog is on probation. Another 5 years. We bring girls to his location. No time, no.
Look, playboy, I don't need a carty. I'm captain, I lead the army. Bad ratio, I leave the party. Free Somalis, creeping army. Your ex-wavy, we tsunami. Girl from India, sweetest nani. Head so good now, speak Gujarati. You hardly pardon me, I'm laughing again. I assisted, man passed my friend. Look, money like the alphabet. If you wanna see P's, gotta pass on the ends. Came a long way from a park in a Benz to an 18 plate man's park in a Benz. Far from the rest, but I'm far from my best. Life is a lesson, I'm passing a test. Yes, everything blessed. I don't want drama and I don't want stress. My girl got finesse, Caribbean flex. Body and chest, tech body and chest. Thank God more, I grew up with less. Just to the right, raps to the left. Arj in the middle, got seed to the death. Batch full of dogs with the 16s vets.
If you send me the location, then I'll be right there. And make I come check you, my baby. No time, no. And my dog is on probation. Another 5 years. We bring girls to his location. Nigga, I was down, but I made it to the top right now. And I can pull a couple grand on my pocket right now. Yeah, I'm so fly, yeah, I'm flying in the rocket right now. And all the games you play never stop right now. I pull up on the block, I see everybody watching. Cause it's diamonds on my chain, and it's diamonds on my watch. Money moves, off-white shoes, came straight from Virgil Abloh. I've been down, I've been low, had my mattress on the floor. Me up enough, can't build it up. Can I ring my cellular? Me have a big fat split bunning up. In a the big black Benz pulling up. Please tell everybody to start pulling up. Enough champagne from the bar coming up. Party hard, make I live my life. Nigga, I was down, but I made it to the top right now. And I can pull a couple grand on my pocket right now. Yeah, I'm so fly, yeah, I'm flying in the rocket right now.
And all the games you play never stop right now. If you send me the location, then I'll be right there. So make I come check you, my baby. No time, no. And my dog is on probation. Another 5 years. Me bring girls to his location. No time, no.
That was Dave, and the song is called Location. Dave is featuring Burna Boy. You may remember Burna Boy recently won a Grammy Award. It was a first for Africa. He shared that Grammy, not share as in they will share the Grammy, but on that same night, Wizkid, also from Nigeria, won a Grammy Award. Before that, I was in conversation with Yasin Mohammed, who stays in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, where the current terrorist attacks are taking place. He was essentially saying South Africa may as well have to prepare for war, because the sense he gets is that there may be a spillover, seeing that South Africa and Mozambique do share a border and are neighbors within the South African development community. Please enjoy another song by Sadhana. It's called Lag Jagale. I'm going to be playing more music until we get to the next segment, where we'll be looking at the topic of xenophobia and asking the question, is this really about hate crimes, or there is a benign economic war against China that's taking place, but is currently directed at any person who is either of Chinese descent or is Asian? Please enjoy a song by Sadhana. It's called Lag Jagale.
हमको मिली है आज ये घड़ियां नसीब से हमको मिली है आज ये घड़ियां नसीब से जी भर के देख लीजिए हमको करीब से फिर आपके नसीब में ये बात हो न हो
Music Station. Capital 88.1 FM.
Amadoda okukhusela amanina isizwe sawo ingengawo ahamba igqugula ngendlela zokwenzakaliswa kwawo. Sifuna amadoda alusindiso lwentombi zesizwe ezinokuwathemba ngobukho bawo. Sifuna amadoda ayakuthi wona azithobe ukuze isizwe siwaphakamise abe zinkwenkwezi zeAfrika nakwizizukulwana ezizayo. Nanso into efunwa yiAfrika. Nanso into elilelwa ngamanina ayo nawayithandazelayo. Ndinithanda nonke emakhaya.
We apologize for doing something that I do not enjoy, which is cutting music while it's playing. As I promised, we have 3 segments on the show. We start at 3 and finish at 6 p.m. every Saturday. And now I'm joined by my guest for the last segment, which is called World in View. I'm joined by Nina Huang as well as Melissa Fen. I hope my pronunciation was apt. Ladies, welcome to Dialogue Sessions with Toki Mohoto on Capital Radio. How do you do?
How are you?
Hi.
I'm glad to be here.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for honoring the invitation. As is the case on our platform, we try and look at everything that happens on the global stage, but most importantly, get experts or people who have a lived experience of the phenomena we're debating and have them tell us what it is exactly that we're trying to unpack and understand better. And today, as is no other different day, we are looking at what is emerging as xenophobia, hatred, or any form of discrimination that is directed toward Asians, in particular people who are either of Chinese descent or have some relation with China. Again, we're going to be talking with the topic and looking rather at, is it really about hate crimes, or this is another veiled attack at the economic supremacy of China, or we're basically clutching at straws? Thank you once again, ladies. By way of starting our conversation, I usually ask my guests to make a brief intro as to who they are and what their career focus is, and then we zoom into the crux of the matter.
Okay, my name is Melissa. I'm studying towards becoming a therapist. So I currently have my honors in psychology and bachelor's in criminology. I'm also a part-time artist.
My name is Nina Huang. I'm currently based in the United States. My whole career, which lasts about a decade long now, is devoted to help foreigners and especially Americans to have a better understanding of China. I did that through writing and programming.
Great stuff. I think there's been a lot of mixed reaction where China is concerned. Some people celebrate what it's done, looking at from the time of Chairman Mao to what it is today, an economic powerhouse of the world, competing with the US, obviously, and also looking at what Chinese people have exported by way of either their manufacturing sector, their culture, or even what we see in visual media. I often joke and say, the first time I ever interacted with a Chinese person was looking at movies by Bruce Lee. That's all I knew about China. Unfortunately, I did not make a distinction between Kung Fu or karate, but I knew how to make the moves. And of late, we are seeing an emergence of xenophobia. What has been, in your experience, encounters with this phenomena?
So because COVID, we mostly work from home, so I don't really go out very often. But I heard from a lot of my friends who had really unpleasant encounters on the street. The other day, a friend of mine who is also in New York City, she sent me a video of a person on the subway calling her and say, "Go back to Asia." And I also heard terrible stories and read stories on the news that some Asian women's hair was pulled by a person on the street. Yeah, horrible stuff.
Scary stuff. Yourself, Melissa?
Yeah, so likewise, I've been indoors mostly, but I actually had an incident where I was quite sure I was actually coughed on, so I wasn't sure, if that was, targeted at me on purpose. But there was also a lot of incidents in our community where, there were confrontations where people were just innocently walking in the mall, and then, people were also coughing at them or just telling them, you cause a virus and all these horrible things.
I want to zoom into that assumption or myth that has become a reality for some people and perhaps a justification for meting out certain injustices against Asian nationals. When you look at COVID and how it happened and what emerged from Wuhan and what became public discourse, there was a lot of untruths linked to China particularly and how this developed. But now when you zoom it into individuals of Asian descent and how now they've been vilified, do you feel that there's justification in how people are now seeing Chinese people generally?
I don't think it's justifiable because first, I don't know it's for sure that the origin of the virus is from China. I didn't read the WHO report closely, so I don't know if they concluded that the virus is indeed originated from China. The second thing is, even if it is, we're all all the patients, all those who get infected, even within China, they're victims. How can you blame a victim for the cause of it? They're not the cause of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I actually saw that there's a lot of studies being done later on that show that you actually can't even be sure that the virus was originated from China because there were a lot of different strains and all of that. And like you said, we're victims as well. It's strange how people have dehumanized us to the point that they didn't realize that, China, they were affected firsthand, like the worst. I remember when Italy, had their wave, everyone was so sympathetic and everything. I was like, well, where was that sympathy for the Chinese,
Definitely.
And it started before COVID already. It's just this time it was the virus, but before that, it's our eating habits, which also fed into this whole COVID thing. And then just being different, there's a long history of that's really directed towards us. So I just feel like there's always just this excuse.
Definitely. You can jump in, Nina. I know you had a point there.
Oh yeah. So I definitely agree with Melissa. I just feel virus is the enemy, not the people who got it.
I want to zoom into this. I don't think many people, I think most of us consume news possibly from popular channels. I think if you're in America, there's NBC, there's APC, and all these various platforms. If you're in South Africa and you consume what's globally happening, you'll either look at the BBC, you look at CNN, you look at Al Jazeera, you look at, what's the other favorite channel of mine? Russia Today and all of those. And I do not think many people would have arrived at the fallacious conclusions they did had President Trump not exacerbated the notion of COVID being a Kung flu, quote unquote, or a China virus. Do you feel that had he not inflamed people and incited a sense of discrimination against Chinese, the extent of xenophobia would be at this degree now?
Yeah, I agree. Of course, I think President Trump's rhetoric definitely unleashed the hatred among people. That's for sure. And I feel like it's just like when you're in, I'm just gonna take children for example. If you're in a preschool, when you have a bad behavior, when you make nasty comments, you're gonna get stopped. You're gonna get corrected because that's not nice. That's not how you want to treat people. But what if the teacher started to do that? Yeah. Then all the children will just follow the teacher and be nasty about each other. That's really a bad environment, I would say.
Definitely. Melissa, yourself?
Yeah, I definitely agree as well. Like I said, there's already been pre-existing negative stereotypes towards us Chinese or Asians. But then you see, so the stereotypes where we're always seen as barbaric or somehow being more backwards or having weird cultural norms. And then what Donald Trump has done, he's taken this a step further. He's completely dehumanized us. Not only are we to blame for the virus, he's basically saying we are like the virus. So what do people do with viruses? They want to eliminate them. So I feel that he's basically encouraged people to actually take violent action against us. Like the shooting in Atlanta. The guy himself says it's not racially motivated, but there was actually a Facebook post from him that said that he wanted to eliminate, a lot of Chinese people because of the virus or something like that. So, yeah, I think he's definitely gone and exaggerated all of the hostility that's been boiling for years now.
And I wonder, though, in recent history, what we deduce in terms of statistical analysis, we hear that from 2019 up until 2020, there's been over 3,900 recorded cases of hate crimes against people of Chinese origin or descent, right? And I wonder, do you feel that this is largely concentrated in America or this is happening the globe over too?
So Melissa, I don't know where are you based, but because I mostly read news that's happening in the United States because I'm here. But yesterday when I was doing some research, I noticed that there are anti-Asian sentiments in Europe, like France or Germany. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm based in South Africa. So like I said, we did have incidents as well. And like you said, I also read that there are a lot of European cases as well, like in England, France. So it's definitely universal, I think.
I wonder though, to what extent is the persistent power tussle between China and America on an economic playing field perhaps also adding fuel to fire in what's currently seen as xenophobia?
I think it definitely plays an important role in it. But this is like the power, like the competition. We know that for a decade or even more years to come, there will be competition. And the competition started early on. It's not just started in 2019. But we don't see, like at least I didn't see that much hatred, that much hate toward Asian or Asian Americans in the United States before the COVID. I worked for a local Mandarin TV station here before, and of course, all our reports were very centered on what happened to Chinese or Chinese Americans here in New York City. But I didn't recall we did so many reports on Asians being attacked. If there are any at all, what we did, we would cover it. But we didn't, I don't remember we covered that many anti-Asian events before. But nowadays, you can read a news about a certain Asian, not necessarily Chinese national citizens or Chinese Americans, but Asian Americans in general being attacked every day. So I do think COVID contribute a lot to this, but that's not to say being competitors. I feel like the competition absolutely is a cause of it, because when you look at what happened in the 1990s and 1980s with Japan, was in fierce competition with the United States, there were also anti-Japanese sentiment.
I'm seeing a trend here. At some point, us in Africa, we became familiar with the term Afrophobia, which obviously was a derivative of xenophobia. We've seen also, to a certain extent and degree, what people term Islamophobia taking shape in Europe. And now we're seeing xenophobia taking place in primarily the United States and other parts of the world. But I've never heard of Europhobia or Amerophobia, if there's such a term. I wonder though.
No, sorry.
Continue.
No, that's what I wanted to say. Like, I think the politics between China and America definitely plays a part. That's why I've educated, people that it's very dangerous to spread, a lot of unfounded claims against the Chinese government, even though people think, well, it's just politics. I'm not attacking your culture. I'm just attacking the government. I think that, a lot of the time we become collateral damage. But I think at the same time, there's a lot of gray area. It's hard to differentiate between politics and just this general inability to accept diversity. Because like you said, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Africans, people always see our differences as something negative or something to, get rid of, rather than something that adds flavor and something that's like very complementary of one another. I think that without these differences, the world wouldn't be, so advanced right now.
Definitely. We know, for example, if you speak of America, it's a cultural melting pot, right? There's almost all ethnicities and almost every other nation you can imagine there. And I wonder if the statistic says now the injustices against Asians are largely instigated by African Americans. Is this also a play at racial tension between the two, or is there really merit to this? Nina, maybe if any experience that you've heard of?
So I follow Twitter closely these days on any anti-Asian news coverage. And then I read the comments. A lot of comments are from Caucasians here, and then they will say, oh, so now you know who did this. It's mostly, like you said, African Americans here who themselves are like not doing well economically. So then they will say, now you found it's not white supremacists, then you just stop reporting on that. So there is definitely a lot of discussions, a lot of argument among different racial groups. And then what I read on Twitter, some people would say in the less developed communities, there is also fight and argument between African Americans and Asian Americans, because basically they're fighting for the same resource.
Yeah, I feel it's more of a socio-economical thing. So maybe people who are, more impoverished, like you said, feel more desperate, or they have much less exposure to other races. And then also, obviously, they might, be the same people who are more, more violent to begin with. I mean, like I said, the guy who did the shooting in Atlanta, he's a white guy. I feel, it's racism spans across all races. It's not really. And then the interesting thing as well is, even though it may be black folk that committed some of these crimes, they're still consuming Western media. Like, I find it very interesting that here in South Africa, we didn't have a lot of the black folk actually, being violent towards us. So I was wondering if because on SABC there's less Western media. So I think that's just a very interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, and also when I read the news, actually the New York Times did a very good report, lists the major assault incidents that's happening around the country. And I look at them, most of the incidents happened in either New York City or the West Coast, like San Francisco, when there are a large population of people with Chinese or Asian heritage. So I'm wondering, because the target is right there, so it's easy to find them. And so I don't know if that's true with South Africa. I don't know like the population of people with Chinese heritage there, but that could also, it's just there's so many Chinese people here. So when you put them together, you see there are a lot of incidents happening. And also I agree with what Melissa just said about the socio-economic factor. Because, at the end of the day, people are unhappy because of the COVID. They might lost their job. They cannot walk freely on the street anymore. So their life was impacted very heavily because of COVID. And at the end of the day, they want to find somebody to blame on. And then Chinese people become the target.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, obviously together with the encouragement from Trump, then I feel like it's just, adding fuel to the fire.
Definitely. I want to look at the complicity or the role rather that the media play in either fanning the flames, as it were, or positively profiling cohesion that takes place between both African Americans and people of Chinese origin, right, or Chinese heritage. Is there a role that media plays in exacerbating or ever emphasizing certain things to push a particular narrative?
That I'm not sure, but what I'm concerned is when you do a lot of reports on this, then people who were not necessarily planning to do anything was inspired, and then they follow the bad examples because that's a way for them to get the hate out of their mind. So I just thought people might follow or might take similar actions more just because they read or they saw what is happening on the news. It's all about Asian being victimized, Asians being attacked. But nowadays we see more and more about law enforcement. Like who committed hate crimes were sentenced like certain amount of years. I would like to see more report on that so that people will think twice before they do something like that.
I agree with that.
Continue, Melissa, sorry, continue.
I also think that internalized racism has a big part to play because, again, it's this, I think with Westernization especially, the whole entire world is kind of competing for this kind of, this praise from the West to just kind of act the same or think the same, and then it just feels like anyone who deviates deviates from that, then they're painted as bad or negative. So yeah, I think Westernization has a lot to play, to the point that even minorities within themselves, like I'll be honest and say even Asians, not all of us are united. There's so many different ethnicities, and I feel like there's just this constant fight to just be, hey, take note of me, in terms of getting attention from the West. And sometimes it is about survival, because right now the US is the superpower. So I think it's natural for people to also just feel like, well, if they set the stage for what is a model citizen, then you'll want to do that. And then instead of being united and being cohesive within different minority groups, we're also competing against one another.
That's an interesting view that you're advancing there. Also, I just want to share this. In South Africa, not so long ago, Dr. Harvard was recently appointed as a member of parliament, right? She's Chinese, and she is a member of the ruling political party called the African National Congress. And there was a huge, big hullabaloo that was created around her to say, since a Chinese national is now in government, it means China is going to colonize South Africa. China has come to take over our resources and almost anything and everything. Contrary, though, in America, you have a state senator, a congressional woman, who is from Texas. Her name is Sari Kim, who's been spreading rather unsavory views about people of Asian origin. She's quoted to say, people from China must go back to China and they must take their COVID back to China. Juxtapose the two in South Africa, where South Africans are saying, black South Africans particularly are saying, why appoint a Chinese person in government? And the Chinese community is celebrating to say there's now representation, right? In America, though, you've got Sari Kim, whom some may assume is going to be fighting the cause for equality and social cohesion, but she's spreading opposite rhetoric. How do you manage the fine line between the two?
So Sari Kim, she is not a congresswoman. She's a candidate. She is a candidate in Texas who was doing her campaign, trying to win the seat. She had, so I think it could be campaign rhetorics. The other is I think she lost her endorsement from GOP lawmakers because whatever she said is not what the GOP lawmakers stand for.
I hear you. And yourself, Melissa, when Dr. Harvard was appointed to Parliament, what was your reaction and what were some perceptions that you saw advancing after she was invited into Parliament?
Yeah, so as you said, I myself and much of the Chinese community were very happy because, we've been here in South Africa for like 4 generations now. So we see ourselves as being South African like anyone else. But it felt like a lot of people out of the Chinese community, like you said, were furthering this rhetoric that, she represents China and she's coming to, conquer Africa. And again, I just feel like it's that internalized racism and also that Westernization, Western media, always just pushing that, that rhetoric about China trying to take over the world. They aren't seeing us as Chinese South Africans, which are separate from China. Honestly, the politics in China have nothing to do with us. We see ourselves as South African. So, and then contrasting with the other candidates in America, she's Korean. So, again, that's internalized racism where even Asians themselves aren't very united sometimes, unfortunately.
Scary stuff indeed. I wonder though, to what degree do you feel the state organs in their multiple facets can enter into an arrangement with either people who are prone to commit hate crimes or those who are victims to look at rehabilitation of sort which one is both preventative and also assist Asian communities now, wherever they are, who may be living in fear, to enjoy equal rights and protection as does some nations in America, for example?
So sorry, can you repeat your question? I don't quite understand it.
No problem. I'm saying you've got government, right? In the case of any country, if you have a citizen or someone living there, government has duty to protect that person, right? But I see that there's a degree of disproportionality where some nations within America enjoy more rights and protection. I'll make an example, for example, the Jews, right? They also had been vilified. They also enjoyed a few attacks, but they enjoy a degree of protection that perhaps Asians envy too. To what degree do you feel that government may play a bigger role in ensuring that those who are seen as victims and perpetrators are also managed equally and there's equitable distribution of protection to its citizens?
Yeah, so from what I read, most of the people who were attacked, they're not necessarily Chinese nationalities. They are Americans. They're Americans with a face like me.
Yes,
So I don't think the Chinese government will want to intervene because they're not the citizens of China. But I did receive WeChat messages from, like they have like the press release sort of thing, just asking Chinese nationals to be careful in United States. That's from the consulate. The information is from the Chinese consulate here, asking the Chinese citizens to be more careful because there are anti-Asian crimes happening here. Basically, what it does is just to ask us to be more cautious. But I don't see real actions were taken, trying to intervene. I don't see that because right now I think what's out there, like the events, the people who want to speak in the public are mostly Asian Americans because they are part of the country. And when you say go back to China, how can they go back to China? They're not even from China.
Yeah, I think it's up to the US government itself to protect minorities of all groups. I think Asians are unfortunately left out a lot when it comes to the struggles of minorities. I feel like we're very invisible. But like I said, these hostilities towards us have started a lot longer before COVID. So yeah, it's really up to the US lawmakers, policymakers, and the different sectors of government to really help with that. And actually, I remember there was a call from different Chinese rights activists and activist groups in US calling to actually, I think it was to introduce a new bill or something like that protected Asians, but it was rejected. So I think there's definitely, I feel like there's no deliberate attempts to protect us as minorities.
Yeah, I think the discussion here right now, part of it is still about in the mainstream media. It's not mainstream, but among lawmakers. Is it real hate crimes or is just thefts, robbery? It can happen on any race. It's just happened to be reported more. Now it happened on Asians. There is also a discussion like this, but for Chinese people, Chinese citizens, over the years since the epidemic started, a lot of my friends, because they felt it's so unsafe to be here, and also they lost the faith of the country because you see how much hate people have toward Chinese people or Asian Americans, and you see sometimes how evil, how bad the people can behave when we are facing this crisis. And they totally lost faith in the United States. And a lot of them are very highly educated, very successful in terms of a career in the United States, but they decided to go back.
Wow, quite scary. Whilst we're still in the US, we read in some statistics that there's at least over 40 million people of Asian descent who currently live and work in America, right? Do you feel to a degree, perhaps with your own experience also, Melissa, in South Africa, do you sense that to some extent there's some level of jealousy or fear to say, if we're now seeing more Chinese in my country, quote, unquote, perhaps they're coming to take over local territories, and I, as an indigenous citizen, may perhaps end up becoming dispossessed or becoming internally displaced?
Yeah, I definitely get that feeling. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
I definitely get that feeling a lot. No, but again, I feel it's ignorance to our history here, because again, we've been here for generations. But yeah, there's this idea that there's so many of us coming over, what are our intentions, our motives. I think now that China's gained more power, then again, there's more doubts about that. And I think it's understandable to some degree, but again, I think it's also up to maybe us, the Chinese community, and it's up to people to educate themselves on, the very diverse history and all the different races that contributed to it. Because I feel, again, it's also like, it's like this after effects of the apartheid, there's just this, it's all of these things, although at the surface it may seem political, I feel that deep down, there's still this deep-rooted fear of diversity.
Yeah, so because New York City is like all of people from all over the world, so I don't see the fear in New York City. What I saw is the retail business welcome Chinese visitors, the higher education system, they welcome Chinese students, overseas students, because the tuition fee can supplement the fund, I guess, for their local residents. But I don't know, like in the Midwest or in other parts of the United States, a large influx of Chinese visitors. I think it can scare people, local people, just because it's a totally different culture. People behave very differently from what locals are used to. It could be unpleasant, but that's why I think it's very important to help Americans and even people all over the world understand a different culture.
Definitely. I think culture as a currency is oftentimes misunderstood or misused. It depends who has attention of that culture at that moment. On a positive note, though, or maybe let's laugh a bit, what are some stereotypes that you've encountered and strange things that have been attached to you as a person or as a race group, which you've had to either debunk or often laugh off?
It's not stereotype, but I remember when I just arrived in New York City 10 years ago, people started to speak Japanese. I'm like, why do you assume? I think back then, because it's a while ago, back then China was not, China's economy hasn't taken off. A lot of Asian visitors, I guess they were from Japan or Korea. Then people started to speak Japanese to me in Times Square area in a very friendly way. So you just like, oh, I cannot even blame you. So.
Yourself, Melissa?
I think being from New York, maybe a lot of people are more open-minded, so maybe you have less experiences. But with me, something that's persistent is I've been asked if I eat dog, and if I eat snakes, if I eat all these weird things. And yeah, I remember I was volunteering at a shelter for kids, and they were all like just bombarding me with these questions like, oh, do you eat this? Do you eat this weird thing? I'm like, where are you getting these ideas from,
I thought it's funny because first I took my Caucasian roommate to have dim sum, and I invited her to eat chicken feet. And then the other thing is I feel it's so absurd because French people, they eat liver. I read books about French culinary, but I don't hear anybody laughing at French people eating liver.
Yeah, I think it's
for
ironic,
us.
especially here in South Africa. You know, a lot of the kids who are asking me these questions are they're African kids, and like you said, chicken feet. A lot of African people also eat that. There's a lot of
true.
you know, yeah, liver, kidney, things like that. We share a lot of common things actually, and it's just so interesting. Again, I don't know if it's Westernization now teaching that all these different things are bad when we actually have so much in common.
Exactly.
Definitely. As a parting shot, seeing that time is now officially against us, what are positives that people often misinterpret about Chinese people that you feel need to be overemphasized?
I feel that people thought Chinese people are all the same, but I don't think that's the case. They all say, and also I feel like they will say Chinese people are brainwashed because of the party, but you know, people think differently. You just don't, you cannot think the whole country, the people of the whole country think the same way. Of course not. And nowadays, especially, you can get information from all over the world. Then just don't assume the person you know is the whole race you read about on newspaper or website.
Definitely. Your parting shot, Melissa?
I think a lot of positive stereotypes are actually kind of negative in some way. Is the fact that, you know, we're very smart, and then we just naturally do well. That's, even though it's positive, it's actually dehumanizing because we're still individuals, we're still different. And maybe our hard work is going to be overlooked because of that. They don't know that we struggle as well, just like everybody else.
Definitely. Ladies, it's been a learning curve for me, and I'm certain our listeners too are the more better because of the insights that you've shared today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your hectic schedules and agreeing to honor the invitation to have us learn more about the phenomena called xenophobia and what it is that you have seen or encountered as either lived experiences or reports on the phenomena.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm going to be playing a couple of songs as an exit. I'm going to be starting with DJ Snake. The song is called Taki Taki. I'm going to follow with Davido with Lil Baby. The song is called So Crazy. And lastly, I'm going to be playing Sauti Sol, a song called Melanin. Have a great day ahead, and thank you so much, and continue spreading the positivity.
Thank you so much.
Cheers and bye.
Bye.
When a good girl gone bad, what you gonna do? Run, go meet a dad. You don't wanna do. Well, this is Sauti Sol. What the ranking, what best now? Watch this. Love confession. She's a heartbreaker. She bend over backbreaker. Steaming hot water vapor. I wanna take her. She's a heartbreaker. She bend over backbreaker. Steaming hot water vapor. Boy, I wanna date her. So tell me why you do me so. So tell me why you do me so. Baby, me never let you go. Girl, me never let you go. So tell me why you do me so. Tell me why you do me so. Charlie, me never let you go. Tell me never let you go. Me spend all me money, spend all me cash. Call you me honey, but you threw me on trash. And you think say me gon' leave you like that? No way. Why you do me like that, yeah? Girl, I'm waiting on you. Even if them hating on you. But me never send them go. In my life, I've never seen melanin so dark. You're a queen of the dance floor. Nice socialite when I rubbish scene, baby. Would you put me in your diary? In my life, I've never seen melanin so dark. You're a queen of the dance floor. Nice socialite when I rubbish scene, baby. Would you put me in your diary? She's a heartbreaker. She bend over backbreaker. Steaming hot water vapor. I wanna take her. She's a heartbreaker. She bend over backbreaker. Steaming hot water vapor. I wanna take her. So tell me why you do me so. So tell me why you do me so. Baby, me never let you go. Girl, me never
I think I saw you in the magazine, or maybe on TV. Looking me up close when you're queen, you're a queen. And if you know me well, you know I don't kiss and tell, but I want you to myself, baby.
In my life, yo, me never seen melanin so dark. You're the queen of the dance floor. Night session light on the legacy, baby. Won't you put me in your diary? In my life, yo, me never seen melanin so dark. You're the queen of the dance floor. Night session light on the legacy, baby. Won't you put me in your diary?
She's a heartbreaker. She bend over backbreak, steaming hot water vapor. I wanna date her. She's a heartbreaker. She bend over backbreak, steaming hot water vapor. I wanna date her.
So tell me why you do me so. So tell me why you do me so. Baby, me never let you go. Yeah, me never let you go. So tell me why you do me so. Tell me why you do me so. Charlie, me never let you go. Tell me never let you go.
In my life, I never seen melanin body shaking like a tambourine all night. In a me head, you are the melody, baby. In a me head, you are the melody. In my life, I never seen melanin so dark. You're the queen of the dance floor. Night such a light, Kwa Nairobi scene, baby. Won't you put me in your diary? Heartbreaker, she bend over backbreaker, steaming hot water vapor. I wanna date ya, yeah. She's a heartbreaker. She bend over backbreaker, steaming hot water vapor. I wanna date ya, yeah, 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 yeah.
That was Sauti Sol, and the song is called Melanin. Before that, I was in conversation with Nina Huang as well as Melissa Fenn. Nina is based in the USA. She's an author as well as an NGO program officer. And Melissa Fenn is based in South Africa. She's an honors psychology student and a budding creative. We were discussing the phenomena called xenophobia and how some view it as hate crimes, whilst others are looking at it as benign economic war against China. Before them, I was in conversation with a political analyst based in Mozambique in a province called Cabo Delgado. This is where the terrorist insurgents have basically chased everyone away. And I sense that some see it as more of resource wars than it is sporadic terrorist attacks. Before them, I was in conversation with Leslie Dikeni as well as Vuisile Mshudulu. We were asking the question, in the South African cultural and creative industry context, do we have a poverty of ideas or there is just absent leadership? This we juxtapose against current trends where the Minister of Arts and Culture, Mr. Nathi Mthethwa, took creatives who are currently staging a sit-in at the offices of the National Arts Council to court, and he basically lodged an eviction order which was granted. But the question the artists are asking is, if the president promised us a stimulus package to assist us during COVID, why is it that the 300 million that was allotted to the National Arts Council has not been distributed equitably, and there is no level of transparency when questions are asked? Please tune in to next week's show, where we're going to be unpacking more topical questions or topics around issues taking place in South Africa under the segment called Why Vele, and Africa under the segment called The African Diplomat, and lastly, looking at global issues under the segment called World in View. Next is DJ Sada, who will be taking over with the Saturday Night Fever. I'm going to be exiting and playing a couple of songs for you. Just as a reminder, if you are wondering where you can find Capital Radio, we are found on www.capitalradio.co.za. You can also log in there to ask for advertising space. You can also find us on Radio Garden app. We are also on Mixcloud. You can find us on streaming platforms on both YouTube as well as Facebook. You were with Toki Mohoto on the Dialogue Sessions. Please enjoy more music on
capitalradio.co.za.
Next, I'm going to be playing DJ Snake. The song is called Taki Taki. It's going to be followed by Sankomota Papa. I'm going to be playing Kelly Kumalo and the late Sibongile Kumalo. The song is called Little Girl. If DJ Sada has not kicked our music out, I may play Africa Unite by Bob Marley. Have a lovely Saturday, and thank you for listening to Dialogue Sessions with Toki Mohoto on Capital Radio 88.1 FM. I almost said capitalradio.co.za. You were listening to the
Feel Good Station, Capital 88.1 FM.
Báilame como si fuera la última vez y enséñame ese pasito que no sé, un besito bien suavecito, bebé. Taqui taqui, taqui taqui rumba. Báilame como si fuera la última vez y enséñame ese pasito que no sé, un besito bien suavecito, bebé. Taqui taqui, taqui taqui, taqui taqui. Tienes un besito o un aquí, una flota como Nagasaki. Prende los motores Kawasaki, en la discota Jenny llegaron los Anunnaki. No le baje, el puri sobresale de tu traje. No trajo panticito pa' que el nene no trabaje. Es que yo me sé lo que ella cree que ya se sabe. Cuenta que no quiere pero me tiene peor.
Deja de mentirte. La foto que subiste con él diciendo que era tu cielo. Bebé, yo te conozco también, sé que fue para darme celos. No te diré quién, pero llorando por mí te vieron. Por mí te vieron. Déjame decirte, se ve que él te trata bien, que es todo un caballero. Pero eso no cambiará que yo llegué primero. Sé que te va a ir bien, pero no te quiere como yo te quiero. Puede que no te haga falta nada, aparentemente nada. Hawaii de vacaciones, mis felicitaciones. Muy lindo en Instagram lo que posteas, pa' que yo vea cómo te va, pa' que yo vea. Puede que no te haga falta nada, aparentemente nada. Hawaii de vacaciones, mis felicitaciones. Muy lindo en Instagram lo que posteas, pa' que yo vea cómo te va de bien, pero te haces mal, porque el amor no se compra con nada. Miéntele a todos tus seguidores, dile que los tiempos de ahora son mejores. No creo que cuando te llame me ignores. Si después de mí ya no habrán más amores. Tú y yo fuimos uno, no hacemos en ayuno antes del desayuno. Fumábamos el agua que te pasaba el humo, y ahora en esta guerra no gana ninguno. Si me preguntas, nadie te me culpa. A veces los problemas a uno se le juntan. Déjame hablar, porfa, no me interrumpas. Si te hice algo malo, entonces discúlpame.